Purposes of social work interview. We all know that social work interview purpose is to help the client. But to fully understand the full context, let's proceed. The main purpose of the social worker is to engage the client in dealing effectively with problematic social situations. Every client faces different problems, and the objective of the interview is to help the client to understand his problems and how to make strategies to deal effectively with his problems by providing programs and services that fits to the client needs. Other objectives of social work interview seem to be important are as follows: to collect information about the client, his family, his relatives, his friends, existing problems, and the time of the occurrence of the problems of the client. These information will help the social worker to come up with correct results in his assessment. To gain inner feeling of the client, it is important to have empathy to fully understand the client's feeling. To develop rapport or relation between the interviewer and the client, the social worker and the client to establish a cooperative working relationship to achieve good and informative conversation. To study the client, his problems, his needs, and resources. Knowing the problems of the client is the most important in the interview. It will help the social worker what programs and services does the client need, and to also properly use the available resources. To give the client an opportunity of emotional release, a feeling of security, and to gain insight into his problems and some of their causes. It's hard to the client to deal with his problems. That's why it's important to make the client feel that there's someone he can talk with his problems. To explain the client's assistance, which is available and what is expected from him. It's important to the social worker to explain to the client the available programs and services that the agency can offer because these are what the client needs. To collect information regarding the previous treatment of the present complaints, psychological and medical history, family history, and current environment, etc. History information of the client are important because this will help the social worker's assessment more clearly. To examine the mental status of the client. To examine the emotional state, through process, orientation, and memory of the client. Knowing the mental status of the client will help the social worker what kind of approach he will show to the client.
The next thing that we are going to discuss is all about the social work interviewing skills. So before rushing into an interview questions, you need to build rapport and show respect. Chatting casually about everyday life helps establish a mutual connection or a personal connection. Avoid coming across like you're just there to do your job. So in order for these things to happen, here are some guidelines on how you are going to conduct an effective interview. So the first effective interviewing skill is to provide a comfortable setting. One of the most important social work interviewing skills is creating a safe space for your clients. Asking your clients to refer to you by your first name instead of Mr. or Miss creates a supportive environment that lets your client know that it's okay to open up and let down their guard. In that way, it helps promote a feeling of respect and equality between you and your client. So the second thing that you need to do is to ask for an open-ended questions. Take note that your questions need to have a purpose and should not be based on your own personal curiosity about the client. So an open-ended question is one that cannot be answered with a simple yes or no answer or just few words. Otherwise, question with brief answer is referred as a close-ended question. Take this for an example. Instead of asking your client, what do you do for a living? An open-ended question should be, can you tell me about your job? An open-ended question encourages the clients to open up and talk about themselves, thereby facilitating growth in insight. The third one is practice active listening. Active listening is a social work interview technique that helps clients feel heard and understood. When practicing active listening, the use of mirroring techniques to paraphrase and reflect back to a client what he or she has just said is an important pattern. Active listening involves the combination of talking and listening skills to convey empathy for your client's problem or situation. Just for example, a client may say, "I hate my spouse when he yells at me." And an active listening response should be, "So you feel like your spouse doesn't respect you or treat you like an equal partner." Each response needs to be tailored to what your clients are saying to demonstrate that you are truly listening and engaged in what they are revealing to you. The last thing that you need to do is to reflect and interpret. Take note that interpretation is an interviewing skill that should only be used when you've gathered enough information about a client to make an informed, educated analysis of the situation or problem at hand. During interpretation, you help make connections that might not seem obvious to the client but may be clear to you as a trained social worker. And of course, it is important not to jump to conclusion or make connections between events that are not actually related. Developing strong interviewing skills is vital because asking the wrong questions or responding inappropriately to your client's comments can shut down communication and hinder your overall effectiveness as a professional social worker.